Okay, going to chapter 5, verse 14, I want to pick up the lore of gain. And in chapter 5, verse 14 through 19, can I get one of you ladies to be loud and read it for us?
Moreover, from the day that I was appointed to be their governor in the land of Judah, from the 20th year to the 32nd year of King Artaxerxes, for 12 years, neither I nor my kinsmen have eaten the governor's food allowance. But the former governors who were before me laid burdens on the people and took from them bread and wine, besides 40 shekels of silver. Even their servants domineered the people. But I did not do so because of the fear of God. I also applied myself to the work on this wall. We did not buy any land, and all my servants were gathered there for the work. Moreover, at my table 150 Jews and officials, besides those who came to us from the nations that were around us. Now that which was prepared for each day was 1 ox and 6 choice sheep. Also birds were prepared for me. And once in 10 days all sorts of wine were furnished in abundance. Yet for all this I did not demand the governor's food allowance, because the servitude was heavy on this people. Remember me, O my God, for good, according to all that I have done for this people.
Now you notice that in chapter 5, verse 14, he skips 12 years ahead to 532 and says, looking back on all of my 12 years, I never took the privileges of promotion. People get exploited because of the greed of human nature, but it's not only something we encounter in others, we also experience greed in ourselves. And what happens is, some of us get to the place where we go, hey, I'm a leader, I'm working hard, I ought to have the benefits of working hard. So verse 15, it says that in spite of the struggles around him, some people will just take the benefits. It says that others had laid burdens on the people and took from them. I wasn't going to do that. Nehemiah was entitled to tax those under his care. He was entitled to barter taxes to live well. He was entitled to operate a collection system that allowed for servants to force the people into submission. He was allowed to personally elevate the status of those close to him, and he didn't do any of those things. There were perks he was allowed to take, and he didn't take them. And a good leader might not take everything he's allowed to take because it would present undue hardship on the people he leads. Yet the temptation will be presented to take advantage of people. Now, look at verse 14 and verse 16, either side of 15, because there's a policy that he uses. Nehemiah wasn't simply self-justifying his practices. He was explaining what he believed godly leadership was all about. He was saying in 14 that, look, I have a rightful salary, but it was going to be burdensome. He didn't want to involve heavily the people with a heavy labor on their back, and he stated he didn't want to take advantage of the perks. He made clear that he kept all about the work. Now, as a leader, he was identified with the people, not above the people. I want you to step back and look at the personality of this guy who was promoted. Look at 17 and 18. Look how reasonable and personable Nehemiah was in his leadership. In verse 17, good leaders are aggressively and deliberately generous people. Just because he didn't take all of the perks he could have gotten didn't mean he didn't pay out to people and that he cheated other people or he tried to hold them down. He was very good to the people around him. He was hospitable in verse 17. I wish I could emphasize this more. Awkward people don't lead well. If you want to lead, don't be awkward. Seriously, how many of you work for somebody that's just plain weird? And you're trying to follow them, but they're weird. Awkward people don't lead well. You need to recognize one of the great needs in leadership is not only character, it's also providing a comfortable atmosphere. You have to provide the atmosphere to get people to follow you. Good leaders are careful stewards of what God entrusts in verse 18. In people and in goods. He counted everything that was served. He could account for everything that was spent. He knew what it was. And good leaders are sensitive to the needs of people. If the leader doesn't understand how the people are feeling, he or she is going to make critical errors in the assumptions. So here's the thing. One of the issues he had to face was the temptation to elevate himself. Now, that doesn't work. We're all the way through chapter 5, and they have not yet derailed Nehemiah. But does everybody see that he's already taken on one problem after another? That already he's faced criticism, already he's faced gossip, Already he's faced these draining people and complaints and personal temptations. And now you get to chapter 6, and it continues because this time he's faced with a trio of very personal troubles. Chapter 6 is a trio of personal troubles, and they include slander, private intimidation, and public threats. This is all going to be about fear. And so chapter 6 is when he faces his fears. Now, what are you afraid of? Whatever you're afraid of, the enemy's going to capitalize on. You should know that in advance. I took the time to assemble some fears that maybe you have. There's ablutophobia, fear of bathing, washing, or cleaning. Acrophobia, fear of heights. Agrizophobia, fear of wild animals. Astrophobia, fear of thunder and lightning. Autophobia, fear of being alone or isolated to oneself. Barophobia, fear of gravity. Frigophobia, fear of becoming too cold. Gamophobia, fear of marriage. Globophobia, a fear of balloons or popping balloons. Hemophobia, fear of blood. Ichthyphobia, fear of fish. Melissophobia, fear of bees. Mysophobia, fear of germs, and some I thought I would never hear of. Omphalophobia, fear of navels. Apparently some people are like, don't get that navel near me. Ophthalmophobia, fear of being stared at. Papophobia, fear of the Pope. I'm serious. There is a disease, fear of the Pope, papophobia. I mean, come on. And my favorite, phobophobia, fear of having phobias. I mean, come on. Seriously, there are plenty of some. So let's pick up now the three sections of chapter 6, 6:1 through 9. Here we go. 6:1 through 9, enduring slander. This is all about slander. Any fear that's greater than an awesome reverence of God acts as an idol of ungodly distraction to God's people. If your fear is bigger than your fear of God, it's an ungodly distraction. And enduring slander is the first one. Verses 1 through 9. Somebody nice and loud, please.
Now when it was reported to Sanballat, Tobiah, to Geshem the Arab, and to the rest of our enemies that I had rebuilt the wall, and that no breach remained in it, although at that time I had not set up the doors and the gates, then Sanballat and Geshem sent a message to me, saying, Come, let us meet together at Shepharim in the plain of Ono. But they were planning to harm me. So I sent messengers to them, saying, I am doing a great work, and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you? They sent messages to me 4 times in this manner, and I answered them the same way. Then Sanballat sent his servant to me in the same manner, a 5th time, with an open letter in his hand. It was written, it is reported among the nations, and Gashmu says that you and the Jews are planning to rebel. Therefore you are rebuilding the wall, and you are to be their king, according to these reports. You have also sent the prophets to proclaim in Jerusalem concerning you. A king is in Judah, and now it will be reported to the king according to these reports. So come now, let us take counsel together. Then I sent a message to him, saying, Such things as you are saying have not been done, but you are inventing them in your own mind. For all of them were trying to frighten us, thinking they will become discouraged with the work, and it will not be done. But now, O God, strengthen my hands.
It's one of the great, I really love his answers to people. Yeah, the things you're thinking, not happening. I mean, you got to love those, right? Okay, look at the setting in verses 1 and 2. The wall breaches were stopped. Every gap was closed with the exception of the gateless doorways. The constructed and fortified gates were not in place, so they still were vulnerable, but at least they were down to just those openings. And a conference was called by the opponents of the work. Now, the simple truth is this. Since God's declared objective was the completion of the work, Satan's objective was distracting from the work's completion by slowing it down or stopping it for a time if he could. Let me say it this way. God's objective is whatever he called you to. Satan's objective is everything else. So it's easier. If I can get you distracted by doing good things instead of the thing I told you. See, if the church could get caught up in being a really good soup kitchen, it'll stop giving the gospel. And at the end of the day, soup kitchens don't give the gospel, the church gives the gospel. So what happens is, all we have to do is really, the enemy of the best is the good. What happens is, all you have to do is be doing really good stuff except for what you were called to do. So you can be really, really, really caring for your kids and not supportive of your husband, and your family breaks. It's easy, guys. If the right thing to do is what God called you to do, the wrong thing is anything else. And Satan just has to distract you on anything else. So what I find interesting is that the actual setting here leaves us with this. Everything that crosses your path during your mission from God will either be direction or distraction. Don't forget that. Everything that crosses your path, when God tells you what to do, will either be direction or distraction. Those are the only choices. So when somebody walks in the door and they say, I've got this great idea, direction or distraction? It's going to be one of the two. Now, look at the sound of distraction in verses 3 and 4 so you know how to pick out distraction from direction. In verses 3 and 4, the sounds of distraction in the repeated requests that became annoying, like a gnat flying around your face when you're trying to do yard work. Have you ever gone out and tried to do yard work and the stupid little bugs like around your face and it just will not leave you alone? Anybody who says small things can't be distracting has never tried to do yard work in Sebring. Seriously, one gnat can throw you off. Okay, so here's the deal. It's like the keeping the priority on obedience to the word and fervor in the work is the hard thing. You got to look with discernment to effectively, consistently measure the critical nature of our time. So look what happens in verses 3 and 4. I sent messengers and said, I'm carrying on a great project. I can't come down. By the way, I should make a note. Do you see the plain of Ono in verse 2? When you land the plane in Tel Aviv, it lands on the Lod field, which is the plain of Ono. That's where the airport is. Okay? So the only thing that you know about it in today's world is it's where Nehemiah didn't go. Okay? So I always think, oh no, I won't go. That's how I remember it. Anyway, I know it's cheesy, but I remember it. Anyway, verse 3. So I went and I sent messengers and said, I'm working on a project here. I can't come down to you. Why do they want him to come down? Distract him because he's almost done. What do you want to talk about? I've set up all the walls and I'm about to set up the gates. What are we supposed to be talking about? Oh, but we have to have this. So 4 times they sent me the same message, and each time I sent them the same answer. Have you ever had somebody really drive you crazy with phone calls? To the point where you're going, I have told you everything I'm going to tell you. Why don't you just leave me alone now? You have to see how cool he is. Here's Nehemiah. We're building, we're building. Yeah, tell him no. We're building. Just tell him no. We're building, we're building. Just tell him no. We're building, we're building. Say it this way. N-O. And he says, 4 times I told him no. Like, which part of no do you not understand? Well, you have to understand, if it really is intended to be distraction, they're going to keep coming back. So in verses 5, 6, and 7, look at the slander that they send. This is the heartbeat of the passage. It's an open letter with a false motivation, a lust for power. It's filled with lies. When the father of lies touches a work, he's going to leave a trail of lies behind. It's going to be wise to know the content of what's alleged and by whom, because that's going to have a lot to do with you knowing where it came from. So let me offer you a secret. It's helped me to decide what to answer and how to answer it as a matter of leadership. I think it's probably worth knowing. If somebody questions something we're doing, I look at that as an opportunity to counsel or offer instruction. If they criticize it, I look at that as a positive feedback and try to figure out what we can learn from it. If they lie about what's happening, that isn't to help me, that's to hurt me. Did you hear what I said? So if they question it, that's a helpful thing because you can teach. If they criticize it, that's helpful because it can help you think, hey, maybe we should be doing something differently. If they lie about it, that didn't come from God. That came from the enemy. That's an attack. Lies come from the father of lies. God never seeds lies into the work. If it's lies, it's not God. Now, why is that important? Because if I determine that it's a lie, then I determine that it's an attack, and the enemy is using a weaker brother or sister, so I gauge my response accordingly because I realize we're being attacked. So I have to stop. We have to stop. There's a phenomenon you should know, and it's going on all over the place. We have these drifting prophets that walk from church to walk in the door to tell us what we're doing wrong. They're not attached to any church. They're not responsible to anyone. They're just drifting prophets that drop by to let you know how you're not quite measuring up. We've had a number of them come through our door, and it's amazing. They typically won't go to me. They'll pull other people aside and explain to them reasons in the parking lot why what we're teaching isn't true. They won't ask questions. They'll come to destroy the faith of people. I have been a pastor of 3 churches, and 3 out of 3 have had them come. I don't know what kind of person makes it their job in life to show up on a Sunday morning so that they can not listen and then go tell people out in the parking lot that what was said was wrong. But I do know where they're getting their energy from. So a good leader can afford to spend some time, but they can't run roughshod over people. And look at verse 7. Look at the second half of verse 7. I don't want to talk around this. It says in the second half, now it was reported to the king according to these reports. So come now, let us take counsel together. So I love this. Look at the summons of the opposition for a moment and consider the sheer chutzpah, the guts of these people. Listen to what they're saying. This is the Randy Reading in the White Spaces version. In spite of the fact that I've spread lies and rumors about you, let's sit down privately and discuss your mission. That's what verse 7 says. In spite of the fact that I've been lying through my teeth and, spread it all the way to the government, let's talk because that's going to resolve the situation. You're lying about me. There's not going to be a resolution until you say, we're lying about you. Seriously? We need to feed the fire of opposition by giving them more communication so they can mess it up more and say we said this in private closed doors? I find it interesting. Look at verses 8 and 9. Look at the way he responds. He acknowledges the objective was to promote fear and discouragement. I love that. Yeah, what they're trying to do, let's see. The things you're saying have not been done. You're inventing them in your own mind, and you're trying to frighten us. Okay, you made it up, and let me be very clear. You made it up so that you could terrorize our people. Those are lies. And they will become discouraged with the work, and so that it won't get done. But you know what? That's not really going to work. And so he turns and he says, God's strength in our hands. He made clear that there was a choice to do the work or slow the work, and he decided to do the work. Don't neglect to spot some of the ways the enemy uses intimidation because they're revealed in the text. Look at verse 6 and underline the following words. It is reported. It is reported. I want you to make it a practice of your Christian life when somebody pulls you aside. People are saying, excuse me, do people have names, or am I going to be just listening to cloudy reports from someone hiding behind the chair? Here's what I want to tell you. If you can't tell me who said it, then I don't want to know what they said. Because I can't accept medical advice from accountants. I want to know who they are before I start accepting their advice. So before you tell me about that, stop the cloudy sources. Cloudy sources is huge in churches. People are saying, Pastor, well, let them come and say it to me. I'll be happy to meet with them. Oh, well, they wouldn't want to impose on you. Instead, they're sending you. I got news for you. I'd rather talk to the person who actually has the thought than the person they sent puppeting the thought. I know that's a strange concept, but I'd rather actually address the wounded party. Now, how about this one? Look at the way the exaggeration and inaccuracy are surrounded by baseless rumors. He makes very clear the things which you are saying are not happening. Meaning, baseless, you just made it up. The point leader is this. A good leader will never respond at the expense of the work. He'll respond only to the accuser, and the issue isn't over until they've laid it to rest in God's hands. And that's what he does. He says, I'm not going to respond to this while stopping the work. I'll keep going and tell you, yeah, that's really not true, and then I'll take it to the Lord. And that's all I'm going to do. Let me pull back and say this at this point. Do not spend all of your time running around trying to justify yourself to every critic. You can't do it, and the number of critics don't end. There will always be another critic. So be careful. Now, there was a personal threat that followed. In verses 10 through 14, this is test number 6, facing a personal threat. This time, the test was fired directly at Nehemiah's personal sense of safety. They couldn't rock the people. They couldn't get him off task, so now they go after him. Somebody read 10 to 14.
When I entered the house of Shemaiah, the son of Deliah, son of Mehetabel, who was confined at home, he said, "Let us meet together in the house of God within the temple, and let us close the doors of the temple, for they are coming to kill you, and they are coming to kill you at night." But I said, "Should a man like me flee? And could one such as I go into the temple to save his life? I will not go in." Then I perceived that surely God had not sent him, but he uttered his prophecy against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. He was hired for this reason, that I might come frightened and act accordingly in sin, so that they might have an evil report in order that they could reproach me. Remember, O my God, Tobiah and Sanballat, according to these works of theirs, and also Noadiah the prophetess and the rest of the prophets who are trying to frighten me.
Okay, break this into the 5 points to unravel the problem. First, look at the disturbance point in 10. What's the disturbance point? It's clear in reading the whole chapter that fear is the objective, right? And spying is part of it, and lying is part of it, and those are the methods employed to throw Nehemiah off track. Now, if you look really closely, you can see that Nehemiah goes in, and something seems wrong in verse 10. Can you pick out what seems wrong? Nehemiah goes in to see a guy. What's odd? He's confined at home, but he calls for a conference where? Outside his home. Something's wrong. This is a guy who's confined at home. For some reason, he's been confined at home, but he says, I got the place to meet. We'll meet outside my house at the temple. Something doesn't look right. A good leader cannot let the emotion of the danger blind his senses and force his actions. What was it in the let us meet together that was a problem? What was he asking Nehemiah to do? Nothing wrong with meeting the guy. What was the problem? Okay. Secret. He wanted to meet the man inside the temple, and Nehemiah wasn't eligible to go in. Nehemiah's not a priest. He can't go inside the temple building. So he's asking him to do something God says he's not allowed to do. And he says, look, I'm only doing this to save your life. So here's the thing. Do you understand? If Nehemiah would have done that, look at the religious nature or sound of this deception. Just go in the temple. I mean, God will protect you there. Except for that would have violated the law. He's not a priest. So here's the problem. If he violates God's stated words to save his own life, how can I follow God forward if I ignore what God told me in the past? If they're going to tell you, break the word of God so that God will protect you, that doesn't add up. So he says, wait a minute. I want to stay out of the shadows to do God's work. I want godly results, so I'm not walking into a place I'm not allowed to go in. God's word is already on this. This looks like something like this. You want to build a building to house your ministry, and a man comes in and he offers the money, but you know the source is from a shady business deal. Do you take the money? Look, stay out of the shadows to do your work. God's work grows best in full light. Stay out of the shadows. Okay? You don't need the money more than you need to honor God. God's got all enough money. He can pay for anything he wants. He can make your building as big as he wants it to be. Don't think you have to compromise your ethics in order to pull off ministry. It's not true. But you will be called upon to do it. You will be. Now look at the decision as it's explained in verse 11. I said, should a man like me flee? could one such as I go to the temple to save his life? I will not go in. He says, I can't go in. Am I allowed to do this? If I do what God told me not to do, the choice is wrong. I don't care how tempting it is. This is the logic the modern church needs to recognize. The answer to what we do will not be found in the badly formed moral conscience of the populace. We shouldn't look to the polls to figure out right and wrong and a way forward. The lighted path is the one that was coming from the lamp that you have in front of you. Thy word is a lamp to my feet. Then the discredited prophet, it's interesting because in verses 12 and 13, he gets it. He goes, I perceived that surely God had not sent him, meaning he's coming from somewhere else. Once I figured that out, he wants me to sin so that he can discredit me with going into the temple. I might save my life, but I'll lose my leadership. And he said, honestly, that's not worth it to me. We have to recognize our fear and not be led by it. Look at verse 14. Nehemiah again took his troubles and his frustrations to God in prayer. And again, you see the exact same thing. It comes down to, remember, oh my God, Tobiah and Sanballat, according to these works of theirs, and Noadiah the prophetess, and the rest of the peoples who are trying to frighten me. I think what's so good about this book is that he sees over and over and over right through the tests, and he knows what they're trying to do. Now, let's see if we can get to one of the last major tests of this section, and this one is the answering underminers. Let me say, what are underminers? There's a time when peacemakers are not blessed. Blessed are the peacemakers sometimes. There's a time when peacemakers are not blessed. The final test of this chapter is to confront a situation of spies that are undermining the work from within the camp. Look at 15 to 19. Somebody read it to us.
So the wall was completed on the 25th of the month Elul in the 52 days. When all our enemies had heard of it and all the nations surrounding us saw it, they lost their confidence, for they recognized that this work had been accomplished with the help of our God. Also in those days, many letters went from the nobles of Judah to Tobiah, and Tobiah's letters came to them. For many in Judah were bound by oath to him because he was the son-in-law of Shechaniah, the son of Ura, and his son Jehonan had married the daughter of Meshullam, the son of Berekah. Moreover, they were speaking about his good deeds in my presence and reported my words to him. Then Tobiah sent letters to frighten me.
Okay, again, the chapter ends with frighten me. So this is what the whole objective of the chapter has been. Fear, fear, fear. But look at there's three ways I split this up. In 15, the work was accomplished. Put a box around chapter 6, verse 15, because that's the end of the 52-day wall building project. The entire book hinges on 6:15. That is, up until 6:15, it's the story of how they got the wall built, even though it's written probably 12 years later. He's going back retrospectively. And then in verse 16, the work was accomplished in 15. The wicked were astonished. Those who boasted that such a project could never get completed were confounded because evil often boasts as though God is their equal competitor. That's all bluster. God has no equal. He's going to finish what he chooses to finish. There's nobody in heaven or earth that can stop God. Armies can march against him. Chiefs can curse him. Whole populations can spurn him, but God marches on being God. And the people around Judah could see that he was helping the Jewish migrants get the work done, and it frustrated them and robbed them of their confidence. And so in verses 17 to 19, look at the workers and how they got anxious. While the nations about Judah flustered the people in the work camp and were not as confident as they could have been, other leaders tried to coax Nehemiah into peace at all cost. They cried for Nehemiah to be tolerant and understanding to those who tried every distraction to shut the work down. I want to stop here and say something to you. At the end of chapter 6, you are going to live now in a period of time where people will call on the church to be more tolerant and stop preaching the gospel. That they're going to find other ways to try and tell you that the church needs to tone it down, settle it down, get back inside your room, worship all you want inside there, but keep your fingerprints off the public. Don't come out of your church and be telling us anything. They're going to forget that the hospitals and universities in this country were started by the church. They're going to forget that the adoption agencies were started by the church. They're going to forget that the social service agencies that have been taken over by the state were started by the church. They're going to forget all that, and they're going to keep telling you that you need to be more tolerant and get in your corner and be more understanding because we are multicultural, and we can't all expect that one standard truth works for everybody. The problem is, Nehemiah didn't like the slippery sensation of being lathered in butter. You shouldn't either. When people try to butter you up, you need to know that there's something up their sleeve. And so I come to the end of this chapter and I say, there's a time when you should be able to stand up and not make peace with people who are trying to get you off your task. When you get to 15, know that when God calls you to do something, he can get it done. 16, 17, 18, 19, they're going to be astonished because they're going to say it can't be done. Let me tell you how that's going to work in your life. It's going to work very simply. People are going to tell you the gospel doesn't work, but then they're going to watch marriages get healed right in your ministry. They're going to tell you the gospel doesn't work, but they're going to see people's lives turned around. Do you know that there are two kinds of drug care for rehabilitation in this state? Those with Jesus and those without. Can I tell you which one is multiple times more successful? But that just drives everybody crazy that when we can lead people to Jesus, somehow that is so much more effective in drug rehab. You know why? Because the numbers don't lie. So you walk right into the state and they say, you shouldn't have any religion in this. And you go, then you want it to be less effective. Because here's the numbers. This one's 3 times more effective than the one without Jesus. Now, neither of them guarantee taking away everybody who's a drug-addicted person and leaving them clean because people have choices. But one of them empowers people in a greater way than the other one does. That's not a debate. It's scientific. The reality is they don't want that science, so that science doesn't get mentioned.